hot button.
Speaking of how I downloaded Jet Set Radio for $2 and thought about Crazy Taxi, I bought the dumbest named special or remaster ever. The Red Faction
remastered.
Gorillas remastered.
I saw that Snapchat.
Great game.
It
But
makes you know what? Yeah, Red Master. Go ahead.
No, I like
Red Mastered. Yeah, I should have just took it to the extra level. Red Mastered Faction Gorillas. No, what makes that game makes me realize that like Chris Love, big boom boom, big explosion, blow up building. Like that's what it makes me feel like. It's like why do I like that game?
The history
the
of
buildings fall down. I love it.
the history of Volition's like tech is now twice. I thought that those games would have ended up being more influential than they really were, because when Geomod, I guess, was like 1.0, and then I like back when Red Faction originally came out for the PC and PS2, I was like, oh man, we're gonna see this in like every game. Like I pulled like you know the same way people said about the Nemesis system in the Shadow of Mordor, and it like never appeared in anything. And then when and then
everybody just got a notification across the board.
But then
It's cheese time.
Wait, is that your cheese alarm?
Yeah. Sorry. Continue.
You can't just leave that unexplained. No. Actually,
I know exactly.
Yeah, I do too. It's just me for our listeners.
It's a hot bun mystery. It's cheese time at 5:00 p.m. Everybody, cheese time. If you're listening and it's 5:00 p.m., get out your cheese.
Yeah, pull out your cheese sticks now.
Yeah.
All right, so then when Red Faction Guerrilla came out, and this was 2009, did you ever see any of all the behind-the-scenes stuff where they're just like, all our programmers like did research in engineering and like structural integrity and physics for how buildings are structured and how they withstand like stress and how they fall apart, and it was like so much work to be put in just this vast
for me to go
thing.
hammer cross building,
yeah. And then like and I was like, oh man, I was like, and again I flashed back to that original game where I was just like, oh, we're gonna see this everywhere in a few years, like every game is gonna do it.
I said this when we were talking
about it.
Never
happened.
Because people are just like, it's like Red Faction where you hit the buildings and they come down, but like you're a secret agent. And it's like, you know what made Red Faction Guerrilla so good? Was because your objective was to fuck shit up.
Yeah.
That was
really
what was good about that.
That's
Nobody
what I'm saying,
understands that.
Big dumb dumb me, big boom boom.
That's what I'm saying.
That's what makes the game so good.
Nobody understood that about that game, where they're just like, I don't get it. We made a physics engine that's better where buildings collapse. And he's like, yeah, but the point of your game is not to collapse buildings, to fuck with a government. That's what made that game good.
There's no better feeling than running a dump truck just through.
One of the first things I did, it was like, oh, here's an important target. You just throw a bunch of bombs all over a truck and then ramp it over into a building, smash it into it, jump out and blow it up.
No, the best was the backpack that made you do the rhino charge, and you just rhino charge through the bottom of a building and it just falls.
What if that dude, who's the main character, I think it's like Alec Mason. And what if instead he just had no real internal politics at all? He was just like a sociopath that just loved to like...
Every time it went to him, he's just blank. It doesn't say anything.
You just point him in the direction of the thing to destroy. You're a hero. You've done it again.
And then he just rips that guy in half.
Yeah. Oh my god. What a game. All right. What's up, everybody, and welcome to the podcast. Our series on spooky, scary stories is now over.
Yeah, round of applause.
It's November now, guys.
Yeah.
Halloween happened, the devil got resurrected, or whatever happened.
Put on your Thanksgiving hats. We got a whole month of...
Turkey and genocide.
But it's now time to once again get back into the rhythm of classic hot button goodness. Today's going to be a real fun one.
And let's do it unclassically.
Yeah. So often there are releases out there that feel kind of culturally inescapable. World of Warcraft, Fortnite, Grand Theft Auto, all titles with huge and dedicated communities whose inner stories can seem to break right on through to the mainstream.
Advent Rising, you forgot about that.
I did, yeah, sorry. But what about games of the true underground? A game with its own personal timeline of insane, unique experiences that most people in and outside of the hobby have likely never even heard of. A game with its own economic competition and ongoing warfare. A game with its own political schemes, orchestrated alliances, and backstabbings. A game with real-world rivalries and consequences. consequences. I'm talking, of course, about EVE Online, a space-based MMORPG launched across the globe all the way back in 2003 and still continues to this day to fill its history books with insane events participated by the title's exceptionally passionate player base. It was developed by CCP Games. I believe it was even their first project, which is pretty crazy. Now, to give a full rundown on the game's Bible would be virtually impossible. This thing may as well be its own country at this point with the amount of history it contains.
I was trying to figure out a good reference. Yeah, you said it could be its own country. I think
you could do a history class on the history of EVE Online.
Yes, you absolutely
could. You could fill 15 weeks of a college course.
Much of it, and you brought this up to me, much of it may not have been like properly documented either. You talk about, I think the other night at my house you were talking about how like history is written by those who win the war. Yeah, by the victors.
One of the journalists who covers this, who's kind of like become the unofficial EVE historian, he talked about in his early days when he was talking to a player who was a pretty popular pirate, that all of her posts on the forums were all like very like, these people are assholes and like I'm the best, like all this stuff. Like it was very, very,
it's all the influence you need. Yeah.
Very shifted.
Instead we are here today to just give you some cherry-picked highlights of a few of the most fascinating tales from within the world of what is EVE Online. I'm Randall Beatrice, here as always with Austin Blakesley.
Yeah.
And host for today, Chris Anatuano.
I'm doing this one.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm already going to thank you in advance for all your research because I know this topic has interested you for a long time since we started this. I think we've even brought it up on like previous podcasts before, but I wouldn't even know where the fuck to start with this
I didn't
game,
either.
So.
And it was only last night as I was finishing this up that I regretted saying I would do this topic and I wish I had picked something else. All right. So... this won't be... Oh, first of all, I get to read off an iPad. I've always wanted to do this while we're doing it.
Do you want a clipboard instead?
That would also work, yeah. We also talked about how I had to make the font extra big because I'm getting old and my eyes are failing.
The previous script you had, the font was at like, I don't know, 4?
It was 10. So, this won't be a typical kind of hot button episode.
Usually there's more fart sounds.
Yeah. Usually we pick a topic, take a deep dive into researching it, structure some sort of narrative, and then talk about movies or penises instead of the subject matter for 2 hours.
It's my favorite.
So, that's not going to happen. As Randall said, EVE is an insanely complex and expansive game with 16 years of player-generated history. To talk linearly and to get into the fine details of that history would likely be boring to anyone without an intense curiosity. It would also encompass far more than one episode worth. And if it doesn't already have one, it surely deserves its own dedicated podcast for cataloging and analyzing its past.
I feel like there's gotta be one.
I'm sure there is. I didn't bother to look it up because I have to get stuck. If you are interested in the minutia, then I highly recommend the book Empires of Eve, A History of the Great Wars of Eve by Andrew Groen. He's the guy I talked about who was a journalist turned unofficial Eve historian.
Oh, jeez. That's great.
Empires of Eve has a volume 1 and recently fully kickstarted instantaneously. He was on stage at FanFest I was watching a video and he's like, yeah, I haven't checked to see if it's funded, and somebody screamed like, it is, and he looked and it was like $400,000 overfunded. Like,
even that title sounds
for the second volume,
like powerful and elegant. Like, you know what I mean?
It recounts in detail how the major events and players shaped and evolved the game world. Not only an observation of what makes this game so fascinating, but it also weaves in a cinematic narrative. It is still space battles after all.
And there's 2 volumes of this?
Yes.
That's great.
Given its niche following, most people probably don't know too much about EVE. So our goal here today is to give a sampling of interesting stories and try to convey just how unique and spectacularly interesting this game really is.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna learn a lot because to me, it's only been on the outside, like just through osmosis of like.
I read what I could find online, and I listened to a FanFest YouTube video of the guy, Andrew Groen, talking about the first 70% of his book. He literally mouthed the history, one of his favorite stories. He is very passionate. You could tell he got into it as just like this looks cool, I'm a video game journalist. And then was like, oh my god, there's something here.
Do you know if he's still actively playing?
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. I don't know if he plays.
it takes enough time to study it.
He's a journalist, so he had ties with CCP, so he could get and talk to people, and he's kind of like a trusted member of the community as far as cataloging their history.
Oh,
also, we'll get into him later, but one of the particular factions in the game that's lasted a long time has their own archive where they do a history of the game, and it's non-biased.
Right.
They do a very good, like, straightforward history.
Can't just use forums.
No, we'll find out why soon. So, EVE Online is a deep breath. Space simulation, persistent world, massively multiplayer online video game. Or online role-playing game, sorry.
I like this abbreviation. Yeah.
Yes. The SSPW MMORPG was released in May 2003.
I have that on a shirt.
Developed and published by Icelandic developer CCP Games, based out of Reykjavik, which is...
Wow, I'm proud of you for pronouncing
It's only because a friend of mine visited Iceland and talked to me
okay.
heavily about it for like
You
a
don't wanna
month.
say Reykjavik?
Well, it's spelled... No, I mean, I wouldn't...
It's also the only city in the country, I think.
There's more, but that's the big one.
So CCP is mostly known for EVE Online. They have a number of other titles, such as EVE Valkyrie,
Yeah.
an FPS VR space combat sim
Played
set
that.
in the EVE universe. It's now available for non-VR.
It was one of the only VR games that made me sick, so I'd be
Yeah.
interested in trying it.
Yeah, it's not. Gunjack and Gunjack 2 End of Shift, both are VR arcade games where you operate a turret defending a mining operation in the EVE Online universe.
Like Beachhead? Like, I don't know what?
Yeah. Dust
Never played that.
514, a first-person shooter for PlayStation 3 set in the EVE universe. Announced Project Nova, a class-based FPS set in the EVE universe. And a VR sports game called Spark. That has nothing to do with the EVE universe, actually. Oh, yeah, also they have a tabletop RPG and a collectible card game set in the EVE universe.
Great. There has to be one for every game. You were telling me about that PS3 game the other night, and what a hugely ambitious thing
Yes.
that just didn't...
Let's touch on this real quick, because I actually didn't write about this, and I think it's cool. So,
It's a really neat
obviously, the
idea,
joke I'm
but-
trying to make
but
there is that
apparently
CCP pretty much only does this shit.
Yeah.
And that's fine and worth it, and like you said, it's their first title. They were incredibly ambitious from the beginning.
Yeah.
EVE Online is, by nature, an incredibly ambitious project. So just real quick to touch on this Dust 514, it's a first-person shooter, and I won't get into the details yet, but you'll see how it could work, that's supposed to be directly tied to the online
Yes.
PC game.
Yeah.
While you're in space fighting in spaceships, Dust
It's a really
is supposed
cool
to be
idea.
you on the planets fighting kind of planet-side style. And
it
they can
affects what-
interact with
yeah, like the
Let's
other-
say you conquer a planet on the ground on PS3 in Dust.
Yeah.
Now that planet belongs to that faction in the PC game where they're having space battles
Yeah.
above the surface.
Apparently the shooting was supposed to be like...
Yeah,
okay.
ambitious idea, but making a big space sim is a lot different than making a competitive
Yeah.
first-person shooters you were talking about at your house the other night.
I don't know if it failed to find a player base. I found out that it did come out right before, like, BioShock Infinite and The Last of Us and stuff like that.
It
Like,
didn't have a good release schedule, and also, like you were talking about, it's a crowded market.
Yeah.
You have to stand out in FPS,
Especially on
and it was
console.
very mediocre FPS.
I played it.
How was it?
You remember
It was alright.
when I saw the cover, I was like, I remember this game.
Yeah.
It looked like Mag on the cover or
Yeah,
something.
it did look like Mag or Black. You remember that game?
Oh,
Yeah.
God.
All
yeah.
this generic
The whole
FPSs.
idea, it affected Eve, but they
Yeah.
were more ambitious from the start, where it was literally like, I'm sure Chris will get more into it, but whatever the currency of EVE Online was, it was literally like you could create a Dust 514 profile, link it to your EVE Online profile, and then corporations in EVE Online would hire you as a mercenary to fight their ground battles for
sounds so
them,
cool.
Yeah.
and then you would get currency that would then be translatable back into EVE Online.
So that really was meant to complement that larger
yeah,
game.
but
Oh,
then I think
yeah.
it just ended up being like it more affected like the political lore of
Well,
Eve.
what's weird
Yes.
is, like,
Yeah.
I don't... Like, I'm not really sure why they just chose to go with PS3 for that relationship. I guess it
I'm
was
not
just
sure
easier
either.
to
I
sync.
think the
like,
deal
the
was
game
with
that way.
they had a deal with Sony, but
Yeah.
also I think the PlayStation, something about their hardware or software makes it more conducive to cross-platform.
That's why
maybe.
Final
Yeah.
Fantasy
Especially
does it
Exactly.
and stuff,
the,
yeah. And the Valve games, I think we
Yeah,
talked about.
especially
when
with this sort of
Portal did.
stable network, they would need to make this happen.
I do wonder if there was a percentage of people that bought that game thinking they were just getting like a, a
I'm
competitive shooter on
sure.
console, and then had no idea that it was
I'm sure there were
a part of this much bigger thing.
Okay, so the game is said to be inspired and modeled after Elite, which is a hugely successful and influential game that I never heard of from 1984.
That would probably make sense as to why.
Yeah, I
'Cause
looked it up.
wasn't up for
It was apparently a huge huge inspiration.
Any correlation to
games
Elite
like,
Dangerous?
it's Elite Dangerous is a modern sequel
really?
for
Yeah, you
Elite.
didn't know that?
No.
Yes.
That's why it's called Elite Dangerous.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
All right.
It's apparently said to inspire games like Grand Theft Auto because of its ambitious,
shit.
like crazy
Do whatever
player
you want,
interactions.
kind of
Do whatever you want. Games like Freelancer, Wing Commander, Star Citizen,
Commander, yeah.
No Man's Sky. You can see where the inspiration comes from.
That's pretty big.
Elite was developed by David Braben and Ian Bell, and David Braben is actually a co-founder of Raspberry Pi, which I thought was pretty cool. Just
Yeah,
throw it in
that's
there.
nuts. Yeah.
Just like little people attached all over the place.
Yeah.
So.
People are definitely familiar with that.
Yeah, exactly. So, what is the actual game? Well,
That's a good question.
EVE Online gameplay centers around player pilots who control starships. Smaller ones like frigates or destroyers, up into cruisers, battleships, capital ships, motherships, carriers, and onto the infamous
Submarines.
Titans. Players can navigate manually,
Mechs.
like flying, like, your typical manual third-person kind of flying.
Right.
Or you can use commands like orbit this planet, dock here, etc., take a turn,
I'm glad you explained it because seeing like video, I was
It
like,
doesn't make
I don't know
sense.
what I'm
It's all
looking
cinematic
at.
camera footage. Yeah. So you can literally fly the ship like third person physically
Yes,
manually,
yeah.
or you can kind of just click it and
It's
send
pretty
them.
cool.
When you fly bigger ships, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The weapons themselves are all auto target. You click attack a target, and a computer judges distance, velocity, moving, hit chance, all that stuff, and does that. So players make their way through a galaxy containing 7,500 star systems,
That's a lot.
all with their own asteroid fields, stargates, space stations, planets, and moon. And what makes this cool, it's all on a single server for every player in the
That
game.
blew me away.
That's
it's
the-
one
That's the thing
shared
to hammer home
universe, and that's
is
it.
that like the reason that this game has a history, the reason that this game has books, the reason that like if you're good enough at EVE Online, you are in a history
Yeah.
book now. Like nobody,
Yeah.
there are people who do like server first raids in WoW or like
Yeah.
Destiny or something like that. And there's like you can find Reddit posts about like congratulations to this clan for getting the first
Yeah.
raid completion for the new expansion or whatever. But there's no books about it because there's
broken up.
hundreds of
Yeah.
server first raids because there's hundreds of servers for
Yeah.
WoW.
God, I wish every fucking MMORPG
Right?
worked
Well,
this way.
like EVE Online is like if you are the
Yeah.
top of the server, you're the top of EVE Online
I
because
know.
there's one server.
Yeah.
Like that's,
There is nowadays a Chinese server specifically for Chinese players.
Really? Can you
No-
only connect on like that IP?
I think it has to do with that IP address and that language and the way the game's set up, and that should be no surprise given
A separate
the times
economy.
we live in when this episode is written,
Yeah.
that they require a
that is
separate
very-
server. And then they have their own test server. They have a beta server where they roll out new things, kind of like the arenas
The
and Overwatch
PTR
and shit like
servers,
that. Yeah. But there is one single server for every single one of these players.
Oh, that's great.
So, here in this server, players can trade, mine, build, explore, scheme, and of course, fight.
Yeah.
The player advances by training skills, which is a passive process that happens in real time. So, hey, this skill takes 3 days to train, click it, 3 days have to pass. It works when your computer's off, when your account's logged out, all that
Yes.
good stuff.
I think this game was the beginning of the like. You ever see when both in and out of games? A lot of people that will pitch certain ideas and projects will be like, "It's playing when you're not playing, man." Like
Yeah.
it all seems born out of like this, like it, like just through parody of in cartoons
Right.
and everything. I like it.
So, these skills allow pilots to drive bigger and better ships and drive them more efficiently, and then master whatever trade they enjoy most. Even if that trade they enjoy most happens to be griefing.
Long live Goon Squad.
So griefing is not usually allowed in most MMOs. However, here in EVE, stealing, extorting, backstabbing, racketeering, ransom, and piracy are all welcome.
Yeah.
The exception being obvious harassment with no gain.
Right, yeah.
If you consistently harass somebody and kill them with no sort of material gain, that's a different story.
Yeah.
So, aside from the freedom of making your own way in a vast, wild galaxy, the main driving force and one of the most notable aspects of this game is the largely player-driven economy.
Yeah.
This is what most of the game is about. NPCs do trade goods, and then there are some goods that can only be traded to and from NPCs, but a majority of the game's materials are handled by the players themselves.
Power to the users, man. Like,
So we have this giant single-player world where everybody lives, and inside of it, these players have their own jobs. There are players who mine raw materials and process ores for production, or some salvage useful items and make materials that way. Some players literally play as traders. They buy and sell goods to generate profits. Some players focus on just production of those raw materials that were mined and salvaged, and then they turn those and convert them into things like weapons and ammo and ships and useful technology, which are demanded and required by other players. And of course, there are mercenaries, pirates, and militaries ready to attack and defend for profit or duty.
Like, this is a true role-playing game.
Absolutely.
Like, this is like paving your own path for what you want your place in this collective universe to be. Like, one of my biggest, I guess, problems in terms of, in more of like a personal way of playing a lot of the bigger, online games now is that you're essentially like, you're not sort of creating your own role, you're choosing one.
I do like to roleplay. If you ever watched me play Skyrim, I'm like, this is my character. I got a history. You remember when I fell down that hole a month back? Like, it's like I play it that.
I roleplay in single-player games. That's how I play through all of Red Dead 2. Like,
Same thing. Yeah. It's hard to get into that in a lot of MMOs when it's like Destiny. It's like, you're the hero, but it's like 100 people just killed that big bad guy.
There's like there's like 3 other people in my party that kind of play a similar role as me.
You just took down Oryx. I took down Oryx last week.
That's why I have trouble. And our sound guy is a notorious ESO player who pushes it on everybody around him. And that's one of my issues with the game is, for me, the Elder Scrolls universe is historically role-playing. And don't get me wrong, ESO is very cool. It puts in my face, hey, look, everybody's doing this stuff. And it's like, that takes away from my immersion.
So the thing is, like, I've been playing WoW Classic, which we will have a WoW Classic themed episode soon by the end of the year. And we're not sure exactly the date, but there is a very interesting thing about that game, because similarly to how you're talking about Destiny, it's like, oh, you priest, you need to help me. This guy fell asleep and he's going to get killed. And then you go and click a button and wake the guy up.
Focused.
And then it's just like, but like, you also have to stand in a line and wait for the guy to respawn sleeping so that you can wake him up, because there's 1,000 people doing the same quest as you.
Oh, you mean like that? Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just like all their thing about like them building out this lore and being like, you're a part of this battle. It's like, I'm not though, because this battle just respawned on a timer 5 minutes ago. Like, but then you have the actual.
Because it doesn't waste your time, but also
WoW wastes your time a lot.
Wow, I'm sorry. No.
Hold on.
I was talking
notorious for wasting your time.
No, I know. I was talking more about Destiny in the sense of like, if you need a public event to do, you just wait like 90 seconds.
Exactly. But the thing is that like the thing that Destiny and a lot of like the Division and stuff like the newer class of MMO are missing is like, when I got into WoW, you can pick professions, and that's like the thing. I did that when I played Final Fantasy 11 too. It's like, oh, I'm a professional fisher and a tailor, so I can make cloth armor, and it's like
something that other players who weren't that class would find useful.
Yeah, but like I'm also a priest, and priests need wands, and tailors and fishers or whatever. No, I think I'm a skinner. Tailors and skinners can't make wands. Enchanters can make wands, and that's another profession. So I had to find somebody who was an enchanter.
It's a very forced community.
And I had to pay them in order to make me a wand. And like that social interaction, that little bit of WoW is all of EVE. And it's all on one server.
That's a good way.
And they have like their own company economists to deal with the like.
If you need a ship, you have to go to a guy who makes ships, and he got that materials from a guy who mined those materials. Usually, sometimes they're all into not a specific guy, but a person who mined those materials. And
I mean, in most games, an NPC would fill all of those roles.
Most of those roles.
Yeah.
So
but like in certain MMOs, like the big ones like WoW and ESO and Final Fantasy, like those ones, those roles are filled by people in very specific situations, and then NPCs the other half of the time. And it's like, Eve took the lore part out of it. There's not an evil enemy. The evil enemy is whoever's the best at the game and is
Now,
controlling
there
the
is
economy.
also, unfortunately, a heavy amount of lore if you want to play like a story. Like, there are 5 factions of NPCs who control space that you can't even interact with, that all have their own battles and bullshit.
Like, so Eve doesn't follow around the thing that a lot of MMORPGs do, where, like, you are the most important person in the universe.
Absolutely not.
So let me ask you a question then. When you jump into
that's definitely
do you know,
cliche
you
at
jump
this
into
point.
Eve Online, is there, like, a quest?
Honestly, I don't
There's
know.
probably some kind of tutorial, but
There's
beyond
gotta be a
that, I don't
tutorial,
know.
but it's not like... I imagine it's not like WoW where you sit there and go from exclamation point to exclamation point for 60 levels before you can get into the big aspects of it, right?
Honestly, I don't know, and I
Probably
feel
not.
dumb for not playing it or looking that up. So let's,
God, I thought
let's
about
move
It's
on.
not exactly penetrable and an easy way to, like...
No, it's not.
For
In
this
fact,
episode.
the game has an intensely difficult learning curve that puts off a lot of people.
And that's, I think, intentional. Like,
Yeah.
because you only want that interaction with people that are, like, on the same level that you are.
So the
in terms of
game,
what you're looking for.
all those systems in the game are split up by high security, low security, and nullsec.
Lulsec?
NULSEC, nullsec. Which is also, I believe, a nickname for what it's actually called.
Null means does not exist.
I'm assuming no security is the abbreviation. So, the first 2 are patrolled and defended by the NPC policing units Concord, which is an acronym for something that was too long and I don't care about. If players commit crimes in high security zones, such as attacking each other, doing things like that, stealing, Concord will automatically come to destroy their ships.
Oh, that's great. It's like a GTA police force
Yes,
kind of
and Concord is designed to continuously scale to the size of the enemy. So get rid of your ideas of taking massive fleets and trying to invade
was wondering
NPC
that
space.
too.
They will always scale and design. They're designed to
Okay.
never be beaten.
That seems like a more realized, like No Man's Sky has a...
Yes, and in turn, this deters from people from actually doing this and wasting time. So, low security zones, they still maintain turrets, but Concord ships won't attack aggressors. Instead, they will mark these unprovoked aggressors, and that allows other players to freely attack them. That's what happens in low security
That's
zones.
smart. Yeah.
Finally, though, where all the best action happens is nullsec. Here, the only law
Anarchists.
is the player. And that's not to say that there is no law at all, because nullsec is where the players of the game organize themselves into corporations.
So I think that's
Just
the,
like international
that's the
waters.
Thing,
Like, I don't-
that's the thing that other MMOs are missing.
Yeah.
Right.
And no matter where you go, there are rules.
It's not just like these zones are lawless wastelands. This is where the corporations are. The EVE Online equivalent of guilds are corporations. Corporations form themselves into alliances with other corporations, and then those alliances tend to form blocks of alliances of super corporations and super alliances, and then a lot of times those all join together and become coalitions.
Good thing that doesn't happen in the real world, right?
Was this something they intended, or did it just grew and became this?
It became this. Corporations, I'm over here, I got a corp. A corp is like a guild. You have a CEO, and then the CEO can be like, you're my first, you're my analyzer, you're this and that. They have specific roles for all these. And then say it's only like 10, 12, 15 players. Now there's a bunch of other corporations that only have 10, 12, 15 players. They join together with other corporations of 10, 12 members. Now they're an alliance, and then they have an alliance, and they go, oh, we're this alliance, and then some other alliance is like, we need help, and they join up. And
There's
form
going to be a lot of
coalition.
these then, too.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is where the meat of the game takes place. Corporations, alliances, and coalitions control territory and resources in nullsec through trade, diplomacy, and often war. Those territories and resources...
Universal language.
Yes. Those territories and resources are always shifting. Now, it is like RuneScape and WoW and shit in the sense that you mine an asteroid field and then it respawns after X amount of time.
Yeah.
But those things are controlled by whoever controls these areas. Star systems are, as you think, a star system with planets and moons and all that shit. And then they're separated into regions, which are groups of star systems. And then you have the entire EVE map, which is, as we said earlier, 7,500 systems. Fucking gigantic.
A lot to work with.
It's like some 5,000 or something odd regular star systems, and then wormhole systems, which are sort of like you take wormholes into
They transport you to-
the single systems. And there's like 1,000 of them or so. So for what? Why do they go through trade, diplomacy, and war and territories? Entertainment?
For the Knolls.
Glory, duty, and sweet, sweet ISK.
ISK?
And
That's the money.
And that's not the abbreviation for Icelandic krona, which it is. That's actually what it's
Wait,
called.
really?
Yeah. It's the abbreviation for the in-game currency Interstellar Credit. That's credit with a K.
With a K.
Like that popular fighting game, Tekken.
Oh. I was like, other games have done that before.
That was
I was
obviously
thinking,
Mortal Kombat.
yeah, well, I was like, Killer Instinct does that as well, right? Don't they spell combos with a K also? Or is it,
No.
it's just
I have
Mortal
no idea.
Kombat?
No, Killer Instinct does C, because combo breaker.
It also starts with a K.
It does, but the word killer
No, it's
starts
Killer
with a-
Instinct with a C. C-I-L-L-E-R. So, though EVE Online has a limited free-to-play aspect, which I thought about downloading until one of the Steam recommended reviews with 300 hours on record said, don't download this game because it has a high learning curve and I don't want to play it anymore.
Listening to that opinion, though, would be like somebody asking you about Destiny.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, Austin was like, should I buy Shadowkeep? I was like, no. All right, so any sort of actual progress in the game, though, requires a monthly subscription.
Yeah.
This monthly
How much is it? Do you know?
15 a month, I
yeah,
think.
15. I
That's
believe.
pretty standard, I guess.
So this monthly subscription can be purchased in two ways. Using real currency to buy in-game time, like we just said, our $15 a month.
Boring.
Or through an item called the Pilot License Extension, or Plex.
Yeah.
That's a cool name.
That is.
Plex is an item with a few uses. You can use Plex to buy multiple character training, or you can passively upgrade skills across multiple characters simultaneously, which you can't do otherwise.
Seems like a hot commodity.
Yes, that's what it's used for a lot of the time.
Okay.
It can be used in EVE's online cosmetic marketplace called the New Eden Store. And I read it's not just cosmetics anymore, but
Oh, really?
I don't know enough about the game to get into why that
Okay.
pisses people off.
Yeah.
But if it's any consolation to how other pay-to-win games work,
yeah.
I'm sure that pisses a lot of people off.
Makes sense.
And most importantly, you can use Plex to add 30 days subscription time to your account.
Yep.
Lots of players pay for their subscriptions by buying Plex with in-game money.
I like it that's not capped either. Like, at what point if you're just like, I could play this game for the next 200 years? It's
So,
like, ooh.
every other material in the game, just like this, players control the market demand, supply, and in turn, the in-game price.
So here's the thing. WoW, you can buy your subscription time with gold. It
Really?
changes based on the, not in Classic, but in the retail you
Oh,
can.
okay.
But it changes based on like the market of WoW too. The thing is, you can buy it, you can't trade it. Can
Gotcha.
you trade Plex in EVE? Do you know?
Yes.
Yes.
Plex
Yeah.
is an
That
item
I
like
know you
everything
can.
else.
So
players control the supply, the demand, and the
So
cost.
the thing is, if you're rich enough in EVE, you can buy a bunch of this shit, and then you can literally pay people
Start
in
a-
your corporation.
like, yeah, be
you
a
can
leader of a
join my
community,
corporation. I'll pay,
Pay
for your game
subscription.
time. Like
and
that's,
I am sure that happens.
Oh, yeah.
absolutely.
So,
It's
Plex,
like the real world.
That is it's pretty enticing. Yeah.
Plex can be bought and traded among players with the in-game currency ISK, like we just said.
Yeah.
Or it can be bought from CCP and licensed retailers for real-life money.
Yeah.
So,
that
if-
already gives it value.
So if we
outside
know
of
how
it.
much ISK a Plex is worth, and if we know how much Plex can be bought for real-world money, this in turn allows us to calculate the in-game costs of ships, corporations, battle losses, and beyond into real-world dollars.
So
Right.
that's where they get those numbers from when you.
That's
when
why
you
I
see
wanted
that.
to tell you when we were talking about this at your house. I was like, it's a bit more convoluted than
Then
just this. equals
because those
this.
make for very. I don't want to use the word clickbaity, but very.
But yes,
yeah, the headlines.
clickbaity-esque headlines.
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah.
So, this leads to what I'd say most people know about EVE Online. It's famous for game battles costing large sums of, quote, real-world money. Like, famously, the bloodbath of B-R5RB.
Yeah, that has its own like Wikipedia page.
Yes,
I think.
an almost 24-hour battle involving over 7,000 players, costing 11 trillion ISK, or loosely converted to 330,000 US dollars.
That does make for an enticing read. Like just that.
And though that number is mostly apocryphal, or at the very least convoluted, since the conversion isn't always done with real-world currency directly,
Right.
it is at least a good metaphor for the real value of these battles.
Yeah.
Those great battles are the stuff of legend in EVE Online, and they are direct cause for these epic wars between player factions consisting of thousands of real people. The time and resources spent in-game and out-game is staggering. And even more fascinating is the cause of these conflicts. The human element at the center of it all is where this game really, really shines.
Yeah, because there's nothing in the game to ignite that spark. No. That's all...
Sometimes
personal politics.
Game updates spark things that we'll talk about.
Well, that's true, but that's only like circumstantial to how people react to them, like a situation. Yeah.
So these stories are innumerable, as you said in the beginning, and I said in the beginning. There's no possible way for us to cover everything, or even a small fucking portion of what's happening.
That's why this episode took so long.
Yeah. So I was trying to figure out how to word and what to do about this episode. Obviously, we spent the first, 30 minutes talking about how the game works.
Yeah. I think we had to do that, though.
And now...
even for our sake.
I'm going to move on to some of the moments that we're talking about and leading up to, about what makes this game so cool. There's, like I said, a billion battles, a billion things that have happened, and we're not even going to get into the nitty-gritty details of those. Like I said earlier, I suggest reading the first volume of Empires of Eve, which is an incredible book, and once again, shout out to that incredible work. That's a main source for a lot of this material.
Absolutely.
We're going to focus on cool stories from an era between 2006 and 2009 known as the Great War, which is an incredible event that happened and set the precedent for a lot of things that still happen in EVE Online today.
World War One?
Yeah. There were things that happened before this. Obviously, the game was out for 3 years, but...
Are we calling this episode the war to end all... the Space Wars to end all Space Wars?
We can. Write it down.
So, you guys ready to get into the boring, epic tales of things?
Boy, am I ever. I opened my next drink. Let's go.
Yeah, I opened this gigantic Miller High Life can, which looks like...
that you can't fit your...
No,
hand.
I
ran out of Diet Coke.
So, due to wars in the game in 2004 and 2005, the last remaining power in the southern region of EVE's gigantic map was ruled by the Russian Confederation Red Alliance.
Called the Red Alliance? This is already a great setup.
That's dope.
They are dope. Early in the game's history, Ukrainian, Russian, and Eastern Bloc players took a majority of the player base. And then other than that, it was like Australian, European, and American. From the beginning, this game had a very international presence.
Yeah,
which
I was
always
surprised.
thought was very, very cool.
Yeah.
So, a number of...
And that they weren't divided like most game servers are. Yeah.
Apparently there were a bunch of different factions and things that existed and stuff, like I said, in the 4 years leading up to it. And there were great wars in 2004, 2005, which we can't even touch on or even talk about.
They're all dead.
So, due to those wars, just know that now the Russian Confederation Red Alliance controls the southern eastern region of the map. A number of other smaller alliances believed this area belonged to them, probably from some past wars and some other past resources and shit. And though they stood little chance against the Russians alone, united they will be a seemingly unstoppable power. So, the Southern Coalition was born. And it fielded one of the largest fleets the game had ever seen at the time, some 400 ships.
Sorry, I'm just all the visuals are in my head. Like I just picture you against this backdrop. Like
yes, 400 ships. And when I say that, that means 400 players.
Yes, yeah.
When I say ships in this game, I mean players. Those are people, me and you, controlling these ships. There are no AI ships. Okay, drones are kind of AI because some ships use drones and stuff. But I'm talking like, if it's a ship, it's a person. So, the Southern Coalition was born. Southern Coalition was made up of a bunch of different random alliances who wanted to take down the Red Alliance's territory.
Teaming up.
So, the Coalition of the South, that's what they were called, invaded Red Alliance territory, and week after week they smashed their forces and conquered huge areas with ease, and then they pushed well beyond their intended targets. Apparently,
I wonder if there was any warning of that, or if they just
apparently Red Alliance got like kind of complacent and weak, and that's why
they saw an opportunity.
So they pushed beyond. Red Alliance eventually said, enough is enough. They're going to make a stand at their traditional home system regions, kind of where their faction was founded, and they're going to bring up a brand new fleet of dreadnoughts. Dreadnoughts are...
It's like a super powerful
warship, we're looking at the 0 to 100% scale, 0 being tiny ships, 100 being titans, dreadnoughts stand around the 70 to 80% region. They're tough,
still no small feat.
They're powerful
That's like
ships, yes. We're talking take lots of time and lots of training to make. A new fleet of dreadnoughts.
And a takedown.
Yeah. So the Coalition ended up destroying that Red Fleet full of dreadnoughts at that battle.
Nice.
They came there to make a last stand, and they got fucking wiped. The Coalition was huge. They had tons of ships. It was fielding the largest fleet at the time. They wiped them out.
Now, when you lose like a ship, you got to to get it back.
So building it, which some ships take weeks to build. You know. So
this game
Not
is
like a respawn
Yeah,
thing.
I was gonna say there's so much consequence to every little action.
Absolutely. So the Alliance began to fall apart after this battle. The Coalition of the South finished off conquering all of their territory until nothing remained but 70 Red Alliance pilots.
Ooh.
They literally conquered everything. Most of the Alliance players were like, we just lost our last stand battle. We lost an entire giant fleet we spent months making. Fuck it, I'm done.
A lot of people like, fuck
a lot of players
yeah,
packed
I'm
up,
out.
fucking left, moved to different factions, etc.
Yeah.
Those 70 pilots, though, for weeks, waged a guerrilla war on the Coalition.
I'm getting FOMO from this.
Dude, yeah. They harassed production lines. They destroyed stray ships on the outlines of the territory. They became the most finely tuned war machine in EVE. These 70 players worked together immaculately. So, knowing that if they ever planned on getting their name back and getting their territory back, they would eventually have to face that Southern Coalition fleet head on. So, those 70 pilots had a plan. They launched a sneak attack on the system C-J6MT. They call it TAC. They call it C-TAC J6MT, which I think sounds cooler.
That doesn't.
So I'm going to start referring to things as those,
Right, yeah.
just to give you a little bit of the slang. They destroyed all of the Coalition property in the system and then set up a bunch of defenses really quick.
Man.
On May 25th, 2006, the Coalition of the South warped 400 ships into that system, and they were prepared to snuff out the Red Alliance asshole harassers once and for
Some
all.
revenge.
Yeah. After several hours of battle, the Red Alliance emerged victorious. They were outnumbered 5-1. But
Holy
the
shit.
Coalition fleet of 400 ships was vastly disorganized. The Red Alliance was trained, tight, and they were amazing at fighting at this point. They had been working together for months or for weeks.
Mm-hmm.
They fucking wiped out a 400 ship fleet with 70 people. That is just an incredible feat. They literally were the underdogs.
That is a true underdog story.
Yeah, and they won. It wasn't over yet. They just beat the fleet.
Yeah.
Apparently that day, hiding among the Southern Coalition fleet was a spy and a diplomat from a very young organization known as Goon Swarm.
Yeah.
Now, they eventually
Shout
become
out.
a lot more popular, obviously.
Of course.
Founded by Something Awful Form members, the Goons were looking for allies in their upcoming rise to power. And after they watched the Russians display this epic defense of 70 versus 400, they were like, well, there's our allies. Like, we have to get in on the ground floor with the Russians because they're obviously not fucking around in Eve.
And the goons fight dirty too. Like they'll get people to sign up for the game, make a basic ship, and then just kamikaze them into the big
Yes,
ships.
the goons are notorious for apparently being, we don't want to troll the whole game, we just want to fuck up your experience. Like, apparently they're quoted as like literally being like, they're not trolls in like the annoying
No,
fucking
they're not.
sense.
They're just like anarchists in this war. Like
Yes,
this,
they absolutely are. And even more importantly, they're just as dedicated as the rest of these people, which makes them like this almost orc-like force of just chaos in this game world.
It makes everything more interesting, and they're all about that. Just like
Yeah, and they are
overthrowing the balance of power. Yeah,
and they're good at it.
they are.
So they see this Russians and they try to get on the ground floor. I'm not going to go into what happens, but as you can already tell, it's kind of an epic founding. I love this story. Listen to Andrew Groen talk about it. He makes it sound much more cinematic. This last stand of 70 versus 400, and they rise back up.
Yeah.
So the Goons and the Russians and a couple of other people, apparently a big French alliance, all joined together. The French alliance had Federation in their name to join and have the Red Swarm Federation. Their first order of business, get revenge on the Southern Coalition that destroyed and took all of Red Alliance's territory. So the game is littered with epic tales like this, and they're all entirely unscripted.
Yeah.
They're all coming out of a player-driven universe. These are real people with real motives.
And how do you archive this stuff? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's
How do you? Apparently he was trying to like archive things, and was looking at old forum posts and then talking to those people and be like, it'll just be a forum post like, that was a crazy battle at whatever, right? And then he has to email 5 people like, what happened?
Because this predates streaming and like where people were recording everything. Yeah,
he actually talks about that in his second fan fest. He goes, nowadays everybody streams every battle.
Yeah.
So he literally, for the second book, invited people who were fleet commanders during this battle, had them sit down and watch the battles with him.
Oh, that's
and tell
cool.
him
And
what
describe
happens
like what's
as
going
he takes
on.
notes.
That's awesome.
That is awesome.
He apparently they would play it 10 times, and he'd be like, "Yeah, at this point, cruisers are moving over here to make this maneuver and this thing." Like, but this
dude, fuck movers. That is so much more exciting.
Well, but that's one of the coolest parts about this game. There are people called fleet commanders, and all my watching of videos of gameplay, there are people who are fleet commanders. Their job is to just sit here and do this, watch a video and listen to them talk. They're like, all right, everybody use your disruptor things over here on this ship. Oh, this player's doing attack over here. All right, I want every frigate to move over here and use this thing. All right,
it's a true coach.
They literally are like, they're actually being like commanders. And your job is to just listen to what he's saying and then do it.
See, they need a
ship.
cartographer or whatever. Like
that's the difference between it's like a raid leader.
It's like a raid with 600 people.
It's like a raid leader, except the raid boss is another human and nobody had to code the instance.
I think about doing raids where there's like 6 of us on Destiny and how complicated that can get compared to like...
Yeah, now you're a raid leader with 400 players and you're raiding
totally
against 600 other players. Yeah,
that's great.
So it's an incredible thing, dude, and that's part of what makes this so fucking spectacular. Is that those 70 dudes were just dudes, and they were working together. Like, let's move over here, attack this and this.
Last Starfighter like plot where the army is gonna recruit people from this.
Across the galaxy around this time, another one of the game's major factions were making moves. The Band of Brothers.
They're really called the Band of Brothers?
Yes. Okay. From this point forward, now that you know they're called the Band of Brothers, I'll refer to them as Bob, which a lot of people do.
Okay.
The
like
band of...
like B.O.B.
Yes. Yes.
They believe that the Earth is flat.
So Bob was made up of several corporations and mega alliances as usual, and they were finishing up their invasion and defeat of another one of the game's major factions, Ascendant Frontier.
Who were they?
Ascendant Frontier was a whole other faction that was huge and had their own history. They actually, Ascendant Frontier built the first Titan, which was these big ships that are the biggest ships in the game.
That's the 100% one that you're talking about.
Yes, that is the 100% on the scale of what powerful ships.
Great.
Ascendant Frontier had built the first one. Band of Brothers decided they wanted to invade them and did. Band of Brothers controlled a huge amount of territory before they took everything from Ascendant Frontier. This tipped the scales and made Bob the largest and wealthiest faction in the game.
Right, I was going to say.
They conquered all of the West. They pretty much owned all of the West, and now they were conquering most of the South, which belonged to Ascendant Frontier. They had twice as much territory as the next largest faction.
Shit.
Yeah. This is a perfect time for some controversy in the game.
Oh, yeah.
In 2007...
It wouldn't be hot button without that, right? Let's.
In 2007, a hacker by the name of Kagutsaman, who in the 90s called the FBI, pretending to be a representative from the Paris embassy, got them to explain to him how to connect to the FBI conferencing network.
What?
Then invited a bunch of other hackers, and for months, all of them used the FBI's conference system, racking up a $250,000 phone bill on the FBI's dime.
What the fuck is
Incredible.
Oh
I
my
love
God.
that. Yeah. Kagutsaman's like an older French dude, and he's just a hacker.
Oh, man.
But he was also an evil line player.
Yeah.
So, Kagutsaman hacked an enemy corporation's private forum, and he discovered that a player by the name of T20 was a developer at CCP Games.
Ooh, inside job.
Now, developers are allowed to play their own games. It's not illegal. But this developer, T20, was providing his corporation with valuable blueprints that would give them an obvious advantage over other corporations. So he published an expose. I don't know enough about how the game works to explain to you what he was doing, but apparently there's like a lottery that you get blueprints from, and he was doing something with his power to rig it to give his team like a better chance.
Man, the real world's parallel is scary.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, you telling me that a guy that was involved in creating the system was also profiting off of it? That's insane. Video games, right? That's so crazy.
Yeah, good
So
thing
he published this expose, and
space.
Kagutsumin was perma-banned because he released personal information of the, quote, corrupt developers. But he seems satisfied with the results. CCP removed that dev's player account, and they removed the blueprints, and then from this point forward, they set up some sort of internal affairs to manage their employees' player
Did they give him
accounts.
a pair of concrete shoes and like
Yeah.
toss him into the ocean?
But from what I could gather, CCP was more upset with having to remove the players' accounts than actually the misuse of power. It seemed that T20 ended up only getting a slap on the wrist. I couldn't find any like proof, but there's things on a couple of things I read that said he remained an employee there for like almost another year or so.
Really?
Moving on. Yeah.
There you have it.
So everyone already had this distaste for the power and intent of Bob. Bob was apparently, they had a cocky clockwise strategy. We're going to be the first faction to conquer the entire galaxy of Eve. And we're going to do it clockwise. We're just going to move around the map, conquering everything.
Jeez.
Everybody hated them.
Well, yeah, they're the.
Well, yeah.
And now that one of the corporations under Bob was caught cheating, this was the spark that lit the powder keg. Everybody was rallied around this. The goons used this as propaganda to rally every faction in the game to wage
fight
a war against
they're
Bob
like,
and
they're
wipe them off the
colonists.
map.
Like they're literally like fucking. Oh yeah.
So, you got these two major players on both sides. This is all bullet points I wrote down. Don't expect to know anything if you're reading this in your notes. I'm going to kind of talk about this from like memory loosely about
Sure.
what happened. So these are some cool moments from the war, okay, that followed this event. I'm not going to get into everything because, like I said, once again, it's too much.
Yeah.
You know,
We'd be here.
you're all fucking night.
Yeah.
So, early on in the war, Red Swarm Federation is mopping up their northern front with the last remnants of the coalition of the South, okay? They decide to debut a brand new tactic, which is commonplace now in EVE, called the Swarm. They use high numbers of players and cheaper ships to overwhelm the enemy at their HQ.
Oh, that's kind of what I was talking about. Yeah,
Yeah.
with Goonswarm. Okay.
They figured if they attacked the enemy HQ with these huge numbers and overwhelmed them, they would collapse the whole alliance from its heart. During that battle...
Legitimate strategy.
Yeah. During that battle, a doomsday weapon was fired, which is apparently one of the best weapons in the game.
Wait, they have like nukes in here?
Yeah. A doomsday weapon used to be an AoE. Apparently nowadays it's single target damage, but apparently it used to be an AoE.
Can the real world just fight all our wars in this game?
In 2 seconds, this doomsday weapon wiped out 200 Red Alliance ships. 2 seconds,
Imagine being one of
200
those
ships.
players and just like. Psh.
That's 200 players.
Yeah.
If we were playing, there's a good chance that it would be one of us. Like, you know,
Oh yeah, no, I know. I'd be like, I'd be in the front lines.
But Red Alliance still won the battle, just
Yeah,
to show
good
you
for
the amount of
them.
numbers
Yeah,
and
that they
tactics
have.
they had to bring to the battle. So basically, like I said, Red Alliance, remember, they were like, fuck the Coalition of the South. They fucked us before.
Yeah.
We're gonna, take Red Swarm and wipe them out. So they did. They conquered the northern front, and now they angled themselves to mop up the rest of the Coalition of the South, which was the biggest faction of all of them. They were called Latka Volterra, which I looked up, and that's apparently an equation for predator and prey. There's apparently like a math equation
Oh,
to
really?
determine
That's what
like
it
predator and prey.
translates
Yeah, which I thought was like, all right, that's pretty clever.
kinda
name.
badass, yeah.
So Latka Volterra was this giant faction that was the rest of the Southern Coalition, and they were like, well, we're coming for you next because we're getting revenge.
Yeah.
It's revenge time, baby.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Latka Volterra was involved in a lot of the original conquering of their territory. So they go to Band of Brothers, which are their new neighbors since they had just conquered those Ascended Frontier people, and they go, help us out,
Yeah.
Band of Brothers tells them to go fuck themselves. They say, we can conquer the galaxy by ourselves. We don't need you.
Oh.
So, at this point, the Red Alliance finds out that Latka Volterra is building a Titan at a dead-end system called JV1V-O. Now, a dead-end system is what you think it is. The map is controlled by stargates in each of the systems. So you have to go through these stargates to get to these systems. This is one that's at a dead end, which means there's only one way in and out of the system through one single stargate. Apparently, Titans and other ships can do things where they can jump themselves to like skip stargates, but it requires a lot of fuel, which is a resource in the game,
Yeah.
and apparently there's like
Oh, the ships.
there's like a delay on it. Like once you do it, every time you do it, it gets longer in between like when you can do it again.
Dude, how
until
many,
it, like refreshes.
Titans have been constructed and
Nowadays, there are hundreds of them.
Really?
At this point in the game,
this was a
there were 3.
Okay.
One was owned by Band of Brothers. One was owned by the Northern Coalition, which are not even involved in this battle yet. They're
Yeah.
part of the northern part of the map. All this take place in the southern part of the map, just to show you how big the map is.
Yeah.
There's a whole other giant fucking alliance that isn't even involved in this.
I love to think, like, unbeknownst to a bunch of players that are just mining
Yeah.
away at randomly.
Well, they were.
Yeah.
Apparently, the Northern Coalition were less combat-oriented
Yeah.
and much more industry-related.
Yeah. It's like Civ.
Then one was from Lac Volterra, and now they're building a second one. So,
I want to be a spectator in that war, even if I didn't have a place in it.
dude, apparently
Do
that's
people
where
do
a lot
that?
of these numbers
Like,
come
just
from.
fled
Are
there?
people just going, I want to be part of this, and
Yeah.
just joining, and then going, I'll attack these guys, fuck it. Apparently
what I
that's
would
a
do.
lot of it. Yeah.
That's great.
So, they find out this
Isn't that
new
my place
Titan's
in
being
history?
built. Titans are rare ships at this point in the game, okay?
Yeah.
They cost billions and billions of in-game dollars to make. They literally
Takes
take
so
up
much
to
time.
8 weeks to construct. That's real life, 8 weeks
Yeah.
to construct. And in order to be able to pilot one, it takes 190-something days, real life days of pilot training.
Oh my god.
That's almost a year of in-game work in order to be able to pilot one of these things. Just to give you a
this is a job.
scale on how much these ships are worth and what they
Yeah.
are. Apparently, the apocryphal conversion to U.S. dollars is something like a Titan costs
There's
like
less-
7,000 U.S. dollars.
There's less
apparently.
training for us to use, like, heavy machinery at
Oh,
like,
yeah, absolutely.
warehouse jobs. Like, oh my god.
So they're building this Titan in this dead-end system. Word gets out that the Reds are going to come and take it out.
Yeah.
They're
The
going to
Reds.
use their fucking swarm tactics. Lac Volterra assembles a 500-man fleet, which is now the next biggest fleet ever assembled in the game.
Yeah.
But it turns out that it's predicted that, because this is the most, like, 500-man fleet was, like, known. It's apparently predicted that the Reds had 1,000-person fleet coming. So if this 500 was the
people.
biggest ever, nobody even knew how much the fucking Red Swarm Federation was bringing.
Yeah.
But it's okay. Lac Volterra had a plan. They assumed Band of Brothers abandoned them, and they did. So they had to handle this by themselves.
Really, they accounted for if that
Yeah.
was gonna happen. Okay.
So here's their plan. To get into the system, it's a jump gate. They would bottleneck the Red ships, okay? Put all of their 500 ships in the fleet, guns aimed right at the Stargate. So that as the Reds came in, they knew they wouldn't just come in all at once. It's not how the game works. As they
Yeah.
were coming in, they would just blow up a lot of them.
Some Star Wars shit.
Yeah. And then what they would do is this. On the other side of the Stargate, in the system next to it, wasn't a bottleneck. They would keep their Titan hidden in one system over from that one and wait until all of the Reds were bottlenecked trying to enter the Stargate, warp their Titan in, and fire one of those doomsday weapons that destroyed 200 ships and possibly destroy even more this time. It's a pretty good plan.
Great. Yeah.
Attack them from the rear when they're bottlenecked, attack them from the front, catch them as they're coming through the gates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To avoid a
It's
little...
not too far off from like some real world tactics.
To avoid a little bit of this, the Reds piloted 300 pilots, parked them inside of the JV1V-0 system, and then logged them offline so that they could be already inside
That's
once the
great,
battle started. I looked it up. Apparently, here's the deal. You can go anywhere you want and log out, and you'll reappear there when you log back in. However, if you are actively engaged in a battle...
Oh, you told me about
yes,
this.
if you were actively engaged
Yeah.
in a battle, there's a timer before you can log out and disappear. So let's say me and you are fighting off.
otherwise you could
and I'm
cheat
like, oh,
that
I gotta
pretty
go,
easily,
and
yeah.
I log out. My ship will stay there without me piloting it until the timer runs out, and then it'll log out.
Do you know how long the timer is?
I have no idea how long the
Okay.
cooldown
But it's
is.
long enough
It's
for-
long enough for
you to be
things
destroyed.
be affected.
Yeah.
So, on the day of the battle, the plan is going beautifully. Red ships are clogged up in the star system. They're getting attacked by fucking these 500 ships just aiming at the Stargate, blowing them up. On the other end, they're getting clogged up. Boom. The Titan warps into the system, which is like R or something, blah, 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 blah. They warp into the system. He goes to fire his Doomsday weapon at the clogged up Red fleet. Boom. Everything goes black. The whole EVE online server crashed.
Oh no.
CCP gets the server back up and running, and everybody is rushing to log on.
Yeah, I was gonna say, who
You've
who
seen
gets
the
on first?
login queues from fucking WoW.
Yeah.
Imagine if at the very minimum, 1,500 people are trying to log in at the exact same
It's
instant.
in the middle of this fucking.
Guess who gets back on first? The 300 red chip players that were parked from the night before. They log in, and the entire Latka Volterra fleet is just sitting there, all 500 ships, derelict, because they lowered in a battle and logged out.
There's no automated,
There's nothing they can do. The Reds destroy the entire 500 ship
That
fleet.
must have been fun.
Oh my god.
So
Could you
what-
imagine working for that company that was server crash
I know.
affecting that much?
So this great epic battle that was supposed to be this great plan and all this
Yeah.
shit involving titans and thousands of ships never really even got to happen.
Only happened in a game, I'll tell you that.
This collapsed Latka Volterra. Apparently a lot of their players were just so demoralized. They're like, oh, fuck this, I'm
Well, yeah,
done.
if this shit went down, I was just like,
Yeah, I quit the game for sure.
Yeah.
Fucking A,
Yeah.
dude.
How many people do you think just drop kicked their monitors? Like that?
So the Reds won.
Yeah.
They conquered the territory, they finished off, and they got their revenge. And a lot of the Latka Volterra players left and joined Band of Brothers, including the Titan pilot who had launched the weapon in the first place. He wasn't destroyed.
Yeah.
Got away, joins Band of Brothers. Now Band of Brothers has 2 Titans, which is twice as many that anybody else has. Twice as many as the Reds had. They have 0
Yeah.
Oh,
at
yeah.
this point. So, we'll skip forward a little bit, fast forward to another cool event. There's a great battle where the Reds and Band of Brothers are battling, because obviously it's inevitable that these two factions are coming to a head.
Oh, yeah, it's not going to end here.
And that's what most of this war is about. The Reds go, fuck it. Remember when we attacked those other people and we just swarmed their headquarters and their entire organization collapsed?
Yeah.
We have enough people to attack the Band of Brothers. It'll be the biggest battle that's ever happened in EVE, but we have enough people and we can win. Apparently, the guy who led the Band of Brothers was Sir Mole, I believe his tag was. He was like a dictator, kind of. Apparently, whenever you joined Band of Brothers, he got like a cut of like... Because corporations tax their players. That's how they make all these ships.
Oh.
You give a certain amount of your money to the corporation.
that's-
You give your resources to the corporation. In
That's
return,
that's kind of how I thought it was.
in
But I
return,
wasn't sure.
they just give you a ship.
Of course.
You don't have to buy and produce your own ship now. They go, here's a ship.
Yeah.
Give us your stuff.
That would
Apparently,
convince
he was a
me
bit of
that
a
would go along.
dictator, but a good one. Like, apparently, the reason they were so successful is because
Benevolent
he was a
dictator.
dictator.
Yeah.
He piloted one of the Titans called...
Titan AE.
Yeah, just blast Creed.
Sir Mole piloted a Titan called Darwin's Contraption. That was the name of his fucking ship.
That was what I was expecting. Like,
So they're like, fuck it, let's go. We'll go right to fucking Band of Brothers' home system and attack them. And they were like, all right, let's get a fleet together, all this stuff. And then some news came that Band of Brothers was building a Titan at their home system.
yeah.
So this means that they would have 3 in an era where only 4 existed.
Yeah.
So, 5. When 5 existed, they would have 3 of them.
That's some universe
And
conquering.
if they had
power.
3 of them, yes, it is a Death Star.
Yeah.
They could move from system to system and wipe everybody out at their own fucking will.
Maybe that's the true end of what this online game is supposed to be. Like, eventually, it just becomes.
That's philosophy of real life, if you want to get into that.
Yeah.
So Red Alliance gets together and they go, fuck it, we gotta attack now. They fucking jump into the system, huge number. This is the largest battle and the most players ever participating in an EVE Online battle is this battle. We're talking, at this point, over 1,000 players, which is unheard of at this point. Nowadays, there are 7,000 players in some battles.
Yeah.
5,000 players in a battle over here. Some corporations can field 1,000 players in a fucking skirmish. But in this era,
So
it
many
was...
online games feel so quaint by
Yeah,
comparison.
in this era, it was unheard of.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? This was the biggest fucking battle ever. They jump into the system, and all of Band of Brothers' main fleet is positioned above a shipyard. The battle begins. Boom, 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 boom. Everybody's fucking attacking. Red Alliance destroys the shipyard containing the Titan.
Yeah.
And in return, they lose like 100-something dreadnoughts, which is like a huge loss for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The battle kind of peters out, and they don't really destroy the homeland, but they destroy a big concentration of their fleet. They set out to do what they wanted to do, which is destroy the Titan in the shipyard, and they lost some guys of their own, and they go their own separate ways. It was kind of like, it was a win for Red Alliance. It was a win for the Red Swarm Federation, because it's not just Red Alliance at this point. And apparently on April 1st, Sir Mole posts on the Eve forums, all right, you did it. You fucking beat us. You destroyed
on
our
April
Titan.
1st.
On April 1st.
Okay.
Apparently, in the following week, he revealed exactly what happened. They built 2 shipyards in their homeland. One of them was constructing the Titan, and one of them was constructing nothing, and then they placed their entire defense fleet above the nothing one. So the Russians came in. The Russians came in and just focused all their firepower on the shipyard that was constructing virtually nothing.
That's good.
Sacrificed all those ships, and it wasn't even the one that was building the Titan. He publicly fucking faked them out, and it was a big deal, dude. You saw what I explained earlier. Ascendant Frontier lost a battle, these guys lost a battle, and their whole organizations collapsed.
It was like a famous battle in World War II where we set up fake tanks that were just dummies, like that weren't and this just reminds me of that. Like,
well, precisely, and it humiliated.
The strategy still
it
worked.
Openly and publicly humiliated.
Of course.
Them. Most other factions would have just purely collapsed. Because people would be like, I don't want to be part of this faction. They got fucking duped on a public scale, the grandest scale in this game.
Yeah.
However, at the core of Red Swarm Federation was Goon Swarm.
Yeah.
And they could give 2 shits about being publicly humiliated. So of course they survived.
Yeah.
And just to give you a little heads up, Goon Swarm still exists and is a powerful organization today in EVE Online. In 2019.
Good to know.
Goon Swarm is still pumping and doing very well.
Good to know that dead gay website is still going strong.
Yeah. Just a little comment. I have one last thing. Apparently, later on in this war, EVE nerfed Titans. Titans were never allowed to be affected by things that would disrupt warp. So, let's say, you jump into a system and you're like, oh, I'm getting fucked up. I need to warp out. There are other ships that can come in and disrupt your ability to warp, and then you get trapped. They call it tackling. So you could basically trap them in the system. Titans could always do whatever they wanted.
Yeah.
EVE updated and nerfed Titans to where they could be affected by these warp disruptors. Well, apparently, the Sir Mole guy never read this, because Band of Brothers had moved on with their 3 Titans now. They finished the construction and started bombarding and fucking up Red Alliance territory. And during one of the battles, Sir Mole himself came in with his Darwin's contraption without knowing that the night before they had nerfed Titans, expecting to get in a little hit and run if he started taking damage. They disrupted his Titan and they destroyed it. And apparently, this is the first Titan destroyed in battle. I explained to Austin why a little bit ago that the first Titan ever fielded was by Ascendant Frontier, and it was called Steve. And apparently, due to a connection error, it got destroyed when it was derelict and never got to actually participate in any battles.
What a waste!
Yeah, and I was telling him that there's a thing in the game where there's wreckage of Steve.
Yeah.
It's part of the game world.
Oh, that's
you
so
can just,
cool!
guess it.
Yeah, that's great.
So this was the first battle destroyed. I watched a video of it, dude. You hear these guys all right, just focus, blah, blah, blah. And once that thing blows up, there's 100 people oh, fuck yeah! Screaming, fucking cheering, dude. So they ended up getting a little bit of revenge.
Great.
So, real quick, before you get into the rest of this, there's another very important thing that I looked up that I forgot to bring up earlier. EVE Online is built, I won't get into the technical aspects of it too much, but it is built on a version of Python, and it is built on a version, the server is built on a version of Python that is specifically meant so that you do not have to take down the server to update it. So in another
smart.
MMO where they'd be like, oh, we're down for maintenance, and then you're like, well, I can't play the game, let me check the patch notes.
This has to be designed.
That doesn't happen with EVE.
That's why he probably likely just came without knowing the update.
He didn't know it got updated because there's no maintenance time.
Yeah.
It just updated.
I never thought
that's
about
why,
it.
unless you read the patch notes, which it was literally happened within 24 hours, apparently.
Yeah.
So he didn't read the patch notes within 24 hours and lost the fucking one of the Titans.
Yeah.
So that's just a little bit. I'm not going to move on from that That war continues for another year or so and ends up a lot of stuff happening. Band of Brothers does not exist anymore, okay? So if that tells you who fucking ended up winning in the long run.
Austin, can you promise me when you make the thumbnail for this that it has a representation of Goon Swarm? Get that smiley in there?
Yeah.
Their logo is like a bee with like a soldier hat, like a cigar or something.
Low-Tax would be proud.
Yeah. So it moves on from there. That happened in 2008, dude. That was over 10 years ago.
That's crazy. Yeah,
There's still...
No, you're literally talking about this because it's history. Yeah.
I'm talking about because it's history.
Yeah.
And that's not even all the people involved. There are all the stuff involved. That is just one cool moment. I just kind of want to use this World War II style, battle to show you what can happen in this game. And that is a fucking iota of the history of the wars in that fucking game.
Yeah.
So there are two more little random stories that I wanted to cover about the fan bases themselves. The first, and like I said, sorry, we're jumping around. It's just part of the game.
Yeah, these are vignettes.
The first is a tale of dedication. Espionage is commonplace in EVE Online. There's basic spying ships.
That sentence in itself is already fucking awesome.
There's basic spying ships who warp around being scouts and gathering information and stuff. And there are players themselves who infiltrate enemy corporations as members.
Yes.
And they steal resources, information. Like, you join up, hey, I want to join you guys.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. You get in, and you're like, I work for somebody else.
Oh, that's so good.
Sometimes
Dirty.
this spills out into the real world, in a gray area of acceptability by CCP, where players will literally check IP addresses to see if there's any careless spies, or even try to infiltrate and hack private forums to get information about different factions.
This is an ARG now.
So, one time, a corp was accused of forcing their members to download a plugin that was required to access their TeamSpeak. And after some suspicion about the plugin, a bounty for reverse engineering it came out. It was offering Plex. Somebody was offering, I'll give you a ton of Plex if you can reverse engineer this fucking plugin and see what it's all about.
Yeah.
So, apparently, after reverse engineering, it came to be found out that the plugin was designed to prevent people from recording their TeamSpeak. And it also sent their IP addresses to the Corp's headquarters so they could
Holy
see if
shit.
anybody was using proxies.
Now that is above and beyond.
But even more nefariously, it was also assumed to be a keylogger, which is very fucking not cool.
No, that's a little...
Yeah.
Sorry, I was all on board.
That goes from hey, don't record us talking
credit
to,
card
I'm
theft.
stealing your credit card. Yeah.
Exactly.
Fair enough.
But that's not even the most extreme circumstance. One real-world event in particular tops all of that, when apparently ranking members of Red Alliance asked Goon Swarm to provide them with the real-life address of an enemy player in the UK who piloted a Titan.
This is the one I heard
At this
on
point in
Giant
time,
Bomb,
there's only about a dozen Titans or so. Their intention was to get Russian expatriates who lived in the United Kingdom to physically cut the power to a player's house during a battle so that they would go offline and the Titan would be destroyed.
All right, no, I'm back on board. That's badass.
That's insanely fucked up, but also hilarious.
That's fucking wild, dude.
Yes. Holy
That's
shit.
so much dedication.
They literally had a Russian person in the UK.
Who, by the way, expatriate means he wasn't a citizen. He was just living there as either illegally or on work or something.
Yeah.
So, the other story is a bit shorter. Once again, in the gray area of what players can and can't do with in-game currency.
Doesn't feel like anything's off limits at this point.
Yeah. In 2009, the CEO of eBank, the largest player-run bank in the game, stole 200 billion ISK.
Billion?
Or 8% of the game's nearly 3 trillion deposit. He converted it on an EVE black market service and got some 5,000 US dollars out of it. He was an Australian. It was $6,000 or something like that.
What do you use it for? Drugs?
No, he used the money for a down payment on a house and medical bills for one of his 2 sons.
Oh, well, I mean, that's kind of... I guess, yeah.
He was banned by CCP, not for stealing the 200 billion ISK, because there's nothing illegal about that.
Right,
He was
technically.
banned because he converted it in black market means to real money.
Right.
See, CCP designed it so that you could buy Plex and trade it in game, but you couldn't do it the other way around. You couldn't buy Plex with in-game money and then convert Plex back into real-world dollars. It only went
that would be
one
laundering.
way. That would be laundering.
Yeah.
But you could do it through black market means, which he did.
Gotcha.
Now, that's tough, but also ridiculous that he was like, I'm the CEO of a player bank. Like, wait, what? I can do this?
It's called embezzlement.
Apparently, after he embezzled and stole all the money, there's nothing they can really do about it. eBank shut down because all the players withdrew their funds from it.
Yeah, I would.
Obviously. And he never came back to Eve.
Could you imagine if, like...
Why would he? He's already got a house and his kids are healthy.
Could you imagine if people withdrew their money from real world banks from stealing? Because then there'd be no banks.
Whoa, wow, what a nightmare. Quick, everybody.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying no political statements or anything, but also go to your bank, take all your money out,
put it under your
and
mattress.
hide it under your mattress. Yeah.
In your walls.
Yeah.
So I can go on and on about how games are important to people in their own special ways, and how the time we spend with them and the memories and yada yada yada. I've done all that before. I don't think that this case needs to be made here.
That speaks for itself.
It's pretty obvious that the people who play this game are dedicated and passionate. What truly makes this game...
And obsessed.
Yeah. What truly makes this game important is that there's an ever-evolving universe inside of it. A whole history with its own heroes, villains, legends, factions, and borders that are only shaped the way they are nowadays because of the actions of players from 10 fucking years ago.
Yeah, no other game has that kind of...
No other game has that. On the surface, Eve is a space trading and combat simulator. The players inside are no more aware of the grand events unfolding than a single soldier was in any great war. But when you step back, when you observe Eve as a whole, you see that there's so much more going on. And what is that more? I'm not really sure exactly. You got Kojima over here trying to make a game about walking. You got Gone
Peeing
Home.
on mushrooms?
Yeah, you got Gone Home and Bob Was You, and then Call of Duty's making you pay respect for the fucking keyboard button. I don't know what video games are trying to do. But the truth is, video games are so much more, and they're pushing our limits of what we thought they could be every single fucking day. I think Eve is a testament to that video games can be more. They can be anything, even their own universe.
God damn, that outro is good, dude. Fuck you.
All right.
Holy shit.
And that's all I have.
Yeah, that was great.
Oh, what a world.
All right.
I'm going away a little bit wiser today.
Thank you for listening. If you missed it, all the month of October, we did some spooky themed episodes.
If you missed a month...
Yeah. Go back and listen to those. They're great.
Dive back into that stuff.
This will be about a month removed from I redesigned our website.
Yes,
Go check that out. It's got a search bar now. So if you're like, they did an episode on Halo? I don't know. You type Halo in and the two-parter on Halo
I used it. It's
we
awesome.
did type in cum. You do not get that many results.
Yeah.
I also typed in video game.
There was several.
Yeah. But
Common
yeah,
video game.
that website is hotbuttoncast.com. You can go on there. You can find all our websites, and now you can search for specific topics, which is cool.
You just stealth did that.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's also links to all of our social media, so I don't have to cover them, but I will.
Yeah.
You got Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at HotButtonCast. There's a link to our YouTube, which I still can't change the goddamn URL of because YouTube sucks.
Thanks, Google.
There's links to iTunes, Spotify, Google Play. You can also find us in any other podcast services that you use, all of them.
Including ones I didn't know about until we were doing this.
You can email us. There's a link to our email.
You can submit a topic.
You can submit a topic now. Well, you could before, but it was a little more hidden because I just kind of threw that in there one day. But yeah. Thanks for listening.
Wait, I kind of want to end this with one question here. Okay. So all this Eve conversation got me thinking. If
you want to play Eve, I'm gonna go download it right now.
We'll have our own hot button.
Do not.
Squad. No. So there's all this like endless amount of activities in this game, right? Like, and this PvE and PvP and all this like this huge fucking interactive world where everything is affecting everything else. What would your profession be? In the sense of like if you wanted to
pirate.
Pirate's pretty good.
I mean, I want to be a Han Solo. Obviously, I want to be a smuggler.
Like a smuggler?
But there are no things like it's not like freelancer. There isn't that. But apparently, people in the game will just sit outside of Stargates and wait for traders to come in and just
and then raid
ambush them and raid them.
Yeah,
and that just sounds like a lot of fun.
That's pretty good. All right, I'm not too far off from you. I think I'd want to be like a bounty hunter, just for hire. Like just like pay me in-game shit to do your don't get your hands dirty.
If you're still listening this long after the plugs, apparently during that Great War, the northern people were like, yeah, Band of Brothers is cheating, fuck them. And since they didn't have a big fleet, they just scattered hundreds of their pilots to attack all of Band of Brothers systems at once. So they were like harassing them. And Band of Brothers was busy repairing a bunch of shit. They were like, we don't have time for you. We're dealing with the Red Swarm. So they paid a mercenary faction from like the other north to just go and wipe out the other players.
Austin,
Which they did. They came from the south with all these crazy swarm tactics and shit, and the north was like, we never seen this shit before. Wiped them out.
I want to run a bank so that so that I can embezzle it and pay for my kids' medical funds. That's what I want to do.
Yeah, this test link can pay for itself.
Well, if you listen... No, I'm not going to get into that. If you listen to certain YouTubers, the Tesla will pay for itself. Because it's got self-driving.
All right, that's it, guys. We're out of here. Good night.
All right.
Hotbuttoncast.com. Check it out.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.